It was really getting rough and windy now.
The liner's bow plunged down into an unusually deep trough. This was followed by a massive wall of water, at least 70 feet or 21 meters high, that towered over the ship before crashing down on her bow and superstructure. The force of the water tore into her aluminum superstructure and ripped it open like a can opener.
On a stormy night in 1966, the mighty SS Michelangelo, a symbol of luxury, was torn apart by a rogue wave taller than a 7-story building. Striking without warning, the monstrous wave plunged the ship into chaos, killing passengers and crew, and leaving the crew in a desperate fight for survival. This terrifying encounter with nature's fury would forever change how we understand the power of the ocean. Now, drone footage reveals secrets of the SS Michelangelo wreck, uncovering a piece of history never told. What happened that night is a chilling reminder even the mightiest ships are no match for the sea's wrath.
Mr. Steinbeck was killed instantly. Mr. Byrne would die later from his injuries, as would another young crew member. Several other passengers and crew were injured by the violent collision. One crew member with a fractured skull had to be airlifted by the US Coast Guard. Despite the significant damage to her bridge, the ship's vital equipment emerged unscathed. After a few moments of confusion, temporary repairs were made and the Michelangelo was able to resume her voyage. She limped into New York on April 16th with her flag flying at half-mast. Damage to the ship was severe, mainly due to her aluminum superstructure.
At 3 p.m. on January 1st, 1995, an event took place in the Norwegian North Sea that would alter our understanding of ocean phenomena forever. Sensors on the Dropner natural gas platform recorded what is now considered the first officially documented rogue wave in history. Known as the Dropner Wave, or colloquially the New Year's Wave, this giant surge reached a staggering height of 25.6 meters, 84 feet, more than twice as high as the next tallest wave in the area at the time. It marked a turning point in our perception of the oceans and their unpredictable nature.
It's estimated that the wave that struck the Michelangelo was approximately 21.4 meters or 70 feet tall. The explosive impact collapsed a portion of her forward aluminum bulkhead, and a large segment right where her forward passenger cabins were situated was peeled away in an instant. Passengers John Steinbach and Werner Berndt were killed on impact, and a young crew member, Desidero Ferrari, would die from his injuries a few hours later. Another 50 passengers were injured, some severely. But in a major stroke of luck, none of the liner's vital equipment was damaged, including her engines, propellers, or rudder. The worst of the storm was over, allowing her shaken crew to patch the damage as best as they could. On April 15th, they rendezvoused with a US Coast Guard helicopter to airlift a crew member with a fractured skull.
Before the Dropner Wave, the idea of rogue waves was largely dismissed by mainstream science. A statistical model, the Gaussian function, had been in use for decades to predict the potential size of waves in the open sea. According to this model, it was highly unlikely for waves to exceed 15 meters 49 feet, and a wave of 30 meters 98 feet would only be possible once in 10,000 years. This made rogue waves, which could tower over regular waves and appear out of nowhere, seem almost impossible. While sailors and fishermen had long told tales of these freak waves that seemed to rise from the deep without warning, verified accounts were rare. Rogue waves were not mentioned often in oceanography texts, and when they were treated with skepticism. They were often written off as exaggerations, fantasy, or the product of sea myths. For centuries, the concept of rogue waves seemed to belong more in the realm of maritime folklore than scientific reality. Mariners spoke of these enormous waves with awe and fear. Some described waves so large that they appeared to swallow entire ships in an instant. These waves, towering far above the rest of the sea, were said to appear suddenly, without any visible warning, and would then crash down violently. Yet, for all the stories, there was little hard evidence. Ships and their crews that experienced rogue waves rarely survived to tell the tale, and so, the mystery continued to swirl around these rare and dangerous events. It wasn't until the Dropner Wave that things began to change. The confirmation of its existence was a turning point in ocean science, shifting the conversation from speculation to serious scientific inquiry. This rogue wave, recorded by instruments on the Dropner platform, provided the first concrete proof that such massive waves could in fact form and appear in the open sea. The Dropner wave's height far exceeded what the Gaussian model predicted and forced oceanographers to rethink their assumptions about wave behavior. It was no longer just a matter of sailors' tales. It was a real recorded event that had to be examined, understood, and explained. The Dropner wave's discovery led to a shift in scientific understanding and a surge of interest in the study of rogue waves. For decades, rogue waves had been ignored or downplayed by the academic community, but the 1995 incident brought them into focus. Researchers began to ask why and how such waves could form, what conditions led to their development, and how they could be predicted or even prevented. The problem was that rogue waves didn't fit neatly into the existing models of ocean behavior. They appeared suddenly and violently, disrupting the predictable waveform patterns that had been studied for years. What made them so difficult to understand and predict was their size and unpredictability. In the years that followed the Dropner Wave, the scientific community started to take rogue waves seriously. In 1997, just 2 years after the Dropner event, the first comprehensive study on rogue waves was published. This study laid the groundwork for understanding the phenomenon and began to answer some of the key questions that had puzzled oceanographers for decades. Despite the progress made, however, rogue waves remained a mystery. In many ways, they continued to defy prediction and explanation, with their causes being the subject of ongoing debate. One of the challenges in understanding rogue waves was the sheer variety of conditions under which they could occur. Rogue waves can form in open waters, far from land, and appear with little warning. This unpredictability is one of the reasons they are so dangerous, especially for modern vessels. They can strike with devastating force, even against well-equipped ships designed to withstand rough seas. Unlike normal waves, which have a predictable size and pattern, rogue waves can seem to come from nowhere, hitting with extraordinary speed and power. As the study of rogue waves expanded, it became clear that they were far more common than previously thought. While these waves remain rare, their frequency was much higher than earlier models had suggested. Scientists defined a rogue wave as one that is more than twice the size of the surrounding waves. This definition helped clarify the phenomenon and distinguish rogue waves from other more common types of waves. With this new understanding, rogue waves began to be seen as a regular, though unpredictable, part of ocean behavior. Despite their infrequency, rogue waves have been responsible for significant damage throughout history. Even before the Dropner Wave, there were numerous documented cases of ships encountering rogue waves, with catastrophic results. The RMS Lusitania, for example, was struck by a 23-meter 75-foot wave on January 10, 1910. The wave caused significant damage to the ship's bridge, highlighting just how dangerous these giant waves could be. The Queen Mary, while serving as a troop ship in 1942, was hit by a 28-meter 92-foot wave, some 608 nautical miles off the coast of Scotland. The massive liner was nearly capsized, listing an astonishing 52 degrees before slowly righting itself. That event would later inspire the 1969 novel The Poseidon Adventure and its 1972 film adaptation. The most famous instance, however, occurred in December 1966, when a rogue wave struck the Italian liner SS Michelangelo. This incident would serve as a stark reminder of the power of rogue waves and their potential to cause devastation. The Michelangelo was a large Mediterranean liner built for the Italian line in the early 1960s. In her short career, she had seen a mix of success and failure. The event that occurred on that fateful night in 1966 would become one of the most well-known examples of a rogue wave striking a passenger vessel. Up until the 1990s, rogue waves were viewed as improbable events. The discovery of the Dropner Wave, however, confirmed their existence. challenging our long-held assumptions and sparking new research into this mysterious and dangerous ocean phenomenon. As we continue to study these waves, the lessons of the past remind us of the unpredictable power of the ocean and the need for vigilance in the face of nature's raw force. In the years following the Dropner Wave in 1995, the phenomenon of rogue waves gained much more attention from the scientific community. The discovery of this massive wave led researchers to reconsider the ocean's most violent and unpredictable forces. The significance of this event not only laid the groundwork for future studies, but also brought to light the frequency and danger of these waves, challenging the long-standing assumptions about ocean behavior. While rogue waves had been recorded in the past, it was the Dropner Wave that provided solid evidence, marking a turning point in oceanography. Rogue waves, as they were now understood, were not just a maritime myth or an exaggeration of sailors' stories. They were real, and they were dangerous. These waves are defined as those that are more than twice the height of the surrounding waves, meaning they tower over everything else in their vicinity. This dramatic difference in height, the suddenness of their appearance, and their unpredictable nature make them particularly treacherous. They can form without warning and hit with incredible force, posing a serious threat to even the best-equipped ships. Since the Dropner Wave, rogue waves have been the subject of countless studies, each working to unravel the mystery behind their formation and behavior. One of the first things that became clear after the Dropner Wave was that rogue waves are much more common than initially thought. Prior to the 1995 event, many scientists believed that these waves were so rare that they could almost be considered a phenomenon of the past. The mathematical models in use at the time, particularly the Gaussian function, had predicted that waves could rarely exceed 15 meters (49 feet). These models suggested that a wave as large as 30 meters (98 feet) would only be possible once every 10,000 years. This led to the belief that rogue waves were extremely rare, and their impact was often downplayed or ignored. However, the reality was far different. With the confirmation of the Dropner Wave, it became clear that rogue waves are far more frequent than once thought. While they still remain an uncommon occurrence, they appear far more often than the statistical models had predicted. This new understanding required the development of different models and theories to explain their formation and how they fit into the broader understanding of ocean waves. What makes rogue waves so puzzling is their formation. Unlike regular waves, which are the result of predictable forces like wind patterns, rogue waves can appear almost without warning. They form under specific conditions, but these conditions are not easily identifiable beforehand. Rogue waves can form as a result of several factors working together, including ocean currents, wind, and even underwater topography. When the right conditions align, they can create these massive walls of water that rise up from the sea in a matter of moments. These waves can then disappear just as quickly, leaving no trace of their existence except for the damage they cause. In many ways, the study of rogue waves is still in its infancy. While we now know they exist, much of their underlying mechanics remain a mystery. The debate around their causes is ongoing, with several theories attempting to explain how they form. One of the most widely accepted explanations is that rogue waves are the result of wave interference. When multiple wave systems interact with one another, they can combine to form a wave that is much larger than the sum of its parts. This phenomenon is known as constructive interference, and it can lead to the sudden formation of a rogue wave. In these instances, the combined energy from multiple waves creates a massive surge of water that can catch ships and sailors by surprise. Another theory suggests that rogue waves are created by the effects of ocean currents. In areas where strong currents exist, they can interact with waves in such a way that they amplify the wave height, creating a rogue wave. These areas of the ocean, such as the Agulhas Current off the coast of South Africa or the Gulf Stream in the North Atlantic, are known for their high-frequency rogue waves. The interaction between these currents and the ocean's natural wave patterns can create conditions conducive to the formation of rogue waves. Despite the increasing understanding of rogue waves, their exact causes are still a topic of heavy debate. Scientists continue to study their formation and try to develop predictive models that could provide some level of warning. However, because rogue waves can form so quickly and unexpectedly, predicting them in advance remains a significant challenge. This unpredictability is part of what makes them so dangerous. Even though there is now a better understanding of how they form, their sudden appearance still poses a major risk to ships navigating open waters. The danger posed by rogue waves is not just theoretical. There are numerous documented instances where rogue waves have caused significant damage to ships and their crews. These waves can strike with such force that they cause ships to capsize, sink, or suffer severe structural damage. One of the earliest recorded instances of a ship encountering a rogue wave occurred on January 10, 1910, when the RMS Lusitania, a British ocean liner, was struck by a 23-meter 75-foot wave. The wave caused considerable damage to the ship's bridge, but fortunately, it did not sink the vessel. This event, however, served as a warning of the power of these waves, and it was not the last time a ship would face a rogue wave. One of the most dramatic and well-known examples occurred in December 1942, when the Queen Mary, a British ocean liner operating as a troop ship during World War II, encountered a rogue wave that measured an astonishing 28 meters, 92 feet. The ship was in the North Atlantic, some 608 nautical miles off the coast of Scotland, when the wave struck. The force of the wave nearly capsized the 80,000-ton liner, which was carrying 11,339 American soldiers and crew. The ship listed an astonishing 52 degrees before slowly righting itself, a feat that likely saved the lives of everyone on board. The wave caused significant damage to the ship, but it was the ship's resilience and the quick thinking of its crew that prevented a much worse disaster. This incident would later inspire the 1969 novel, The Poseidon Adventure, which was adapted into a 1972 film. Rogue waves, however, did not just affect military vessels. In 1966, the Italian ocean liner SS Michelangelo was struck by a rogue wave while on its regular voyage across the Atlantic. The wave, estimated to be around 21.4 meters, 70 feet tall, caused significant damage to the ship and led to the deaths of several passengers. This tragic incident would serve as a reminder of the dangers of rogue waves and highlight just how vulnerable even the largest and most well-built ships could be in the face of these massive forces of nature. The SS Michelangelo's encounter with the rogue wave in 1966 is just one of many examples that demonstrate the immense power of these waves. While rogue waves are still rare, their occurrence has been far more common than once thought. With the increased understanding of how these waves form and the conditions that lead to their appearance, scientists continue to study them in hopes of developing predictive models that could help prevent future disasters. Until then, the unpredictable nature of rogue waves will continue to make them one of the most dangerous and mysterious phenomena in the ocean. The SS Michelangelo, a beautiful Italian liner built in the early 1960s, became part of maritime history, not just for its size and design, but for its terrifying encounter with a rogue wave. The incident, which occurred in 1966, revealed the destructive power of these monstrous waves and underscored the vulnerability of even the most advanced ships of the time. This story of Michelangelo's encounter with a rogue wave serves as a powerful reminder of the unpredictability of the sea, the strength of nature, and the resilience of the ship and its crew. The Michelangelo was a grand ocean liner designed for luxury travel across the Atlantic. She was constructed in Genoa, Italy, and launched with great fanfare, embodying the elegance of the golden age of ocean travel. The ship was one of the largest built in Italy in the post-war era, and was the pride of the Italian line. She had a sleek white hull, and featured two tall, unusual funnels, designed to divert smoke away from the ship's deck. With her spacious interiors and accommodations for nearly 1,800 passengers, the Michelangelo was intended to serve as a glamorous vessel for travelers on the Mediterranean roads. However, despite her size and allure, the Michelangelo struggled to attract passengers in the face of increasing competition from jet travel, which was beginning to dominate the transatlantic routes in the 1960s. As jetliners made air travel more accessible and quicker, ocean liners like the Michelangelo became less popular, and the ship's passenger numbers dwindled. This was a difficult time for the ship, as its grandeur was no longer enough to offset the increasing shift towards air travel. Yet, for a brief period, Michelangelo maintained a reputation as a stylish and glamorous way to cross the Atlantic. On April 6, 1966, the Michelangelo embarked on a routine voyage from Genoa to New York. Captain Giuseppe Saletti, a seasoned mariner with over 4 decades of experience, was at the helm. It was to be one of his final crossings before his retirement. The ship was carrying a mix of passengers, including notable individuals such as the German novelist Günter Grass and his wife, as well as Bob Montana, the artist behind the famous Archie comics. The weather conditions, however, were far from ideal. Crossings during this early period of the year were often fraught with challenging weather, but the winter of 1966 was particularly difficult. The Michelangelo's road allowed it to avoid the worst of the North Atlantic's rough seas, but by April 12, the ship had to shift its heading to the north to reach New York. This change in course exposed Michelangelo to a more brutal storm system. The weather began to worsen, and within a short time, the ship was caught in the grips of heavy seas and hurricane-force winds. The ship's passengers and crew soon found themselves enduring violent conditions that would test their mettle. As the storm raged, Captain Saletti made the decision to keep passengers inside their cabins for safety. The heavy waves were battering the ship, and Captain Saletti was focused on keeping the vessel on course while navigating the worsening conditions. To minimize the risk of injury, the captain ordered the ship's crew to move all passengers from the forward accommodations to safer interior staterooms. The windows in these cabins were armored to prevent any damage from the storm's impact, and the ship's watertight doors were shut. Safety ropes were placed throughout the public areas to help passengers maintain their balance in the storm. Public announcements were made, urging passengers to remain in their cabins and avoid unnecessary movement. The ship continued to struggle against the storm, but it wasn't just the ship itself that was in danger. During the journey, the Michelangelo picked up an SOS signal from a nearby tanker called the Rocos, which was reporting damage and taking on water. Without hesitation, Captain Saletti ordered Michelangelo to change course and sail toward the distressed vessel. However, before the Michelangelo could reach the Rocos, the tanker radioed again, stating that the situation had been brought under control and that the crew would not require assistance. Captain Saletti adjusted the ship's course once again and resumed the voyage to New York. As the ship continued on its way, the weather seemed to calm for a time. However, a sudden and unexpected disaster would soon strike. An air intake on the ship's foredeck had been damaged during the rough seas, and water began pouring into the ship. Captain Saletti immediately ordered a change in course to reduce the force of the waves on the ship. As the crew worked to repair the damage, the storm seemed to subside, and the skies above began to show some improvement. Feeling that the worst of the storm had passed, the captain allowed passengers and crew to return to the forward cabins. At around 10 a.m., the repair team, led by Vice Captain Claudio Kuslik, had finished their work. They called up to the bridge to inform Captain Saletti that it was safe to return to the ship's original course. Just as the captain completed the maneuver and the ship began to steady itself, disaster struck. The Michelangelo suddenly dropped into a deep trough, and almost immediately, a massive wall of water slammed into the ship's prow and forward superstructure. The ship was plunged into chaos. For those on the bridge, the experience was sudden and terrifying. First Officer Claudio Sutoro, who had only just moved away from the bridge's windows moments before the wave hit, was caught off guard. The wave filled the bridge with water and swept him off his feet. It was a terrifying moment, as the crew was thrown into disarray. Sutoro, in a moment of panic, found himself plunged into darkness as the water rushed through the room. He scrambled to regain his footing, following the sounds of alarms and buzzers which filled the air. Upon recovering, He followed the overwhelming noise to the wheelhouse, where he found the room flooded. Many of the ship's windows had been smashed open, and the crew was struggling to maintain control. Captain Saletti was still stunned by the impact, but he and the crew were able to regain their composure quickly. The ship was still responding to the helm, which was a stroke of luck. Had the ship's vital equipment been damaged, the consequences could have been far worse. The captain immediately took charge, issuing orders to deal with the emergency. While Michelangelo had been shaken, it was not lost. The damage, however, was severe. The rogue wave, estimated to be around 21.4 meters 70 feet tall, had collapsed part of the ship's forward aluminum bulkhead. The force of the wave caused the segment of the ship that housed the forward passenger cabins to be peeled away instantly. Tragically, the wave killed passengers John Steinbach and Werner Berndt on impact, and a young crew member, Desidero Ferrari, would later die from his injuries. Another 50 passengers were injured, some severely, but in a remarkable turn of events, none of the ship's vital equipment had been damaged. The ship's engines, propellers, and rudder remained operational, ensuring that the crew could still navigate the ship. The immediate response by the crew and the ship's medical staff was crucial. As the Michelangelo continued its voyage toward New York, temporary repairs were carried out. The U.S. Coast Guard airlifted a crew member with a fractured skull, and the rest of the injured were treated on board. Despite the extensive damage, the ship was able to continue its journey and arrived in New York on April 16th, flying its flag at half-mast to mark the tragic loss of life. Michelangelo's encounter with the rogue wave, while catastrophic, was a testament to the resilience of the ship and the professionalism of the crew. Despite the horrors of that day, the ship continued its journey and eventually underwent repairs that strengthened her for the future. However, this event would go down in history as one of the most well-known encounters with a rogue wave, demonstrating the immense power of nature and the unpredictable forces that shape our world's oceans. The aftermath of the SS Michelangelo's encounter with the rogue wave was a mixture of relief and sorrow. The damage to the ship was extensive, and the loss of life was a tragic reminder of the power of the sea. But despite the severity of the incident, the ship's resilience and the swift action of the crew allowed it to continue its journey. The Michelangelo would go on to dock in New York on April 16, 1966, with its flag at half-mast, a somber symbol of the lives lost and the damage sustained during the harrowing experience. As the ship arrived in New York, it was met by an onslaught of reporters and concerned family members. The media attention was intense, and the public was eager to know what had happened aboard the ship. The news of the rogue wave's impact spread quickly, and many were shocked to learn that such a large, powerful wave could strike an ocean liner. The event made headlines around the world, and the story of the SS Michelangelo's encounter with the rogue would become one of the most well-known instances of such a phenomenon. Despite the media frenzy, Michelangelo was able to continue his journey. The crew worked tirelessly to make temporary repairs to the ship, and the injured passengers and crew were treated on board. However, the damage to the ship's forward superstructure was significant. The aluminum bulkhead had collapsed by the force of the wave, and a large portion of the forward passenger cabins had been torn away. The rogue wave had not only caused physical damage, but had also created a sense of fear and uncertainty among the passengers and crew. The psychological impact of such a terrifying event would linger long after the physical damage had been repaired. In the days following Michelangelo's arrival in New York, temporary repairs were carried out at the Bethlehem shipyard in Hoboken. These repairs allowed the ship to continue its journey, but more extensive work was required to ensure the vessel's safety. On April 20th, 1966, the Michelangelo departed New York and made its way to Genoa, Italy, where permanent repairs would be made. The aluminum panels used in the ship's superstructure were replaced with stronger steel, a common practice in shipbuilding at the time. The repairs were necessary not only for the ship's structural integrity, but also to ensure that Michelangelo could withstand the forces of nature, should such an event happen again. The decision to replace the aluminum panels with steel was a wise one, as Michelangelo would face another hurricane-force storm just a year later. In December 1967, the ship encountered another severe storm, but this time, the ship was better equipped to handle the rough conditions. The improvements made to the ship's structure held up well, and the Michelangelo survived the storm without sustaining the same level of damage as it had in 1966. This incident was another reminder of the unpredictable nature of the ocean and the need for ships to be prepared for the worst. Despite these improvements, however, Michelangelo's time as an active ocean liner was short-lived. From the moment it entered service, the ship had struggled to attract passengers. The rise of jet travel had made long ocean voyages less appealing, and the Michelangelo, like many of its contemporaries, found itself increasingly unable to compete with the speed and convenience of air travel. The ship's design, which had been cutting edge when it was first built, was now seen as outdated and impractical for the needs of modern passengers. The Michelangelo's passenger accommodations were divided into 3 classes, a configuration that made it difficult to convert the ship into a more suitable cruise vessel. Many of the ship's lower passenger decks lacked portholes, which made the cabins dark and unappealing to potential vacationers. The lack of windows in many of the lower cabins was a significant drawback for passengers seeking a more modern cruising experience. As a result, the ship struggled to retain its appeal as a passenger vessel, and its financial performance continued to decline. By the mid-1970s, Michelangelo was facing severe financial difficulties. The Italian line, which had owned the ship, was struggling to stay afloat in an increasingly competitive market. Despite attempts to convert the Michelangelo into a more modern cruise ship, the ship's design limitations made such efforts largely unsuccessful. In 1975, after nearly a decade of declining passenger numbers and financial losses, the Michelangelo was withdrawn from service. Her final voyage was commanded by now senior Captain Claudio Kuslik, who had been part of the crew during the Rogue Wave incident. The decision to retire the Michelangelo marked the end of an era for ocean liners. Many of the great ships of the past, including the Michelangelo, were no longer viable in a world where air travel had become the preferred mode of long-distance transportation. The ship's final days were a poignant reminder of the changing landscape of global travel and the decline of the once proud ocean liners that had dominated transatlantic routes for decades. In 1976, the Michelangelo was sold to the Shah of Iran, who repurposed the ship as a floating barrack. The ship's luxurious passenger accommodations were no longer needed, and the once glamorous vessel was now a utilitarian space for military personnel. The final chapter in Michelangelo's story came in 1990, when the ship was finally scrapped. After decades of service, the once great ocean liner was dismantled, and its pieces sold off. Michelangelo's legacy, however, lives on. The rogue wave that struck the ship in 1966 remains one of the most well-known and well-documented encounters with such a phenomenon. The incident highlighted the power of the ocean and the unpredictable forces that can appear without warning. While the ship itself may have been retired and ultimately scrapped, the story of its encounter with a rogue wave continues to serve as a stark reminder of the dangers of the sea and the incredible resilience of the ships and crews that brave its treacherous waters. In the years since Michelangelo's encounter with the rogue wave, the understanding of such waves has improved significantly. Scientists have developed better models to predict their formation, and advances in ship design have made it possible for modern vessels to withstand much harsher conditions. However, rogue waves remain an unpredictable and dangerous phenomenon, and the story of the SS Michelangelo serves as a lasting reminder of the raw power of the ocean and the need for constant vigilance in the face of nature's immense forces. The SS Michelangelo's journey from a proud ocean liner to a floating barrack, and eventually to the scrapyard, is a testament to the changing nature of the maritime industry. The once great ships that defined an era of luxury travel are now a distant memory, replaced by modern cruise ships and faster air travel. Yet, the memories of these great ships, and the lessons learned from their encounters with the forces of nature, continue to resonate. Michelangelo's story is not just one of a ship's rise and fall, but a reminder of the enduring power of the ocean, and the challenges it poses to those who venture upon it.